Hey folks, in this video I'm going to talk about my first trip to Port Ratt. If you guys want me to upload the complete raw footage, I can. However, in this video I've edited it down because it took almost 2 hours just to go one way. Also, just as a tip, if you don't have an inferior sailboat or a guild galley, which at this point is everyone, don't use your fishing boat. It's too slow, you won't be able to outrun whatever you come across in the ocean. I was traveling on the fastest ship in game and it still took forever to get there. To go on a fishing boat would take forever and a day. If you really want to get to Port Ratt, use the NPC ferry out of Lima Island. Other than that, I don't see why you'd want to go out there in the first place because all it really is a trade hub. So on the day the patch was implemented, a handful of Dom Games Europe employees logged onto the NA servers and invited everyone to join them at Velia on Velia 3 to go on an adventure to Port Ratt. So I, along with hundreds of other people on the server, made my way to Velia to go on an adventure. I usually play on the very high graphics setting, but there were just so many people I turned it down to optimization mode, and even then I only had about 20 FPS on an i7 with a 1080 GTX and 24GB of RAM. Just think about how many people who show up to a world boss, and then imagine if everyone went to the same channel for it. There were 2 guild galleys at the docks, all owned by GMs and their guild, Siren's Call. The captain of the boat I was on the way to Port Ratt, was GM Xander. Other passengers on the boat include GM Death, GM Lyrad, CM Athon, PM Juska, and Blade Boaks. So we set off towards the direction of Port Ratt. I want to mention that the GMs were role-playing as pirates the entire time. Not too long after taking off towards the direction of the Kuwait Islands, we came across a 3rd guild galley under the guild Salty Pirates, captained by GM Dresden with GM Serenity and Cacao Hugo. With 2 guild galleys under the Siren's Call versus the 1 galley under Salty Pirates, it only took about 5 minutes for it to sink. After it sank, the Salty Pirates boarded either of the remaining ships to head over to Port Ratt. For a short while, it was pretty uneventful until we reached the Margoria region of the ocean. From this point onward, we came across a few hostile mobs, a few pirate ships, and ghost ships. The mobs we came across weren't that dangerous. They went down pretty quickly due to the amount of people we had on the ship. Some people did actually die, but that's because they did not bring potions with them. Now the ghost ships took a while to go down, even with both galleys focused on them. Generally, they end up a distance too far for the ranged classes to actually hit, so the only way to down them is to use the cannons on the ship. There are times they sailed around the boat and were close enough to hit with my witch. They also sometimes dive into the water and resurface during the fight. After the first time seeing it, it just kind of got annoying as we'd encounter another ghost ship shortly after taking one down. We encountered about 4 or 5 on the way to Port Ratt. A ton of people actually fell off the boat, never to be seen again. I fell off the boat once because I withdrew my weapon and the animation pushed me over the edge of the ship. When you fall over into the water, you can swim to the side of the ship and press R to climb the ladder. The positioning is very generous too, so you don't have to be able to physically reach it. The waters on the way to Port Ratt were varied. There were times when the sea was rough and there were tornadoes, other times when it was calm, but there's really not much to look at above the water. The experience was just a little underwhelming, and reaching Port Ratt was even more underwhelming. So, Port Ratt itself is just a port on the face of a cliff. All paths leading up to the island proper were blocked off, at least for now. The GMs gave us 15 minutes to look around, and 5 minutes is all you really need to look at the whole thing. Like I said, there's not much to look at. On the way back, I boarded the ship captained by GM Athon with PM Juska, and they decided to race against GM Xander's ship back to Velia. Now the word race in this context is an overstatement. It still took about an hour and 40 minutes to get back to Velia. At this point, a good portion of the crew were bored and either AFK'd or fished. Thankfully, a lot of people fell off the boat on the way to Port Ratt, and I was able to turn the graphics up back to very high. There were a lot of ghost ships that spawned again, and they would stop the ship to kill it with cannons. GM Athon ended up reaching Velia first, because halfway through the trip, GM Xander stopped the ship for the people who fell overboard. When we reached Velia, we all went to the beach to take a picture, the GM said their goodbyes, and logged off. So to summarize, 4 hours of my life gone, and most of the content I saw during this trip was a little underwhelming. What I really enjoyed was not the content, but actually the fact that the GMs went in game to take the players on an adventure. You don't see that in many MMOs these days. I'm sure there's more to look forward to with Margoria, guild naval battles, underwater content, and maybe just chilling with the guildies on a boat in the ocean. If anything, I imagine this update will make node wars more interesting, just like the node wars in Valencia are. Anyway, that's the story of my first trip out to Port Ratt. I probably won't be going back there anytime soon. My name is Phunky, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.